Hi, I'm Julia Aleksic, and I will be discussing the impact that Brexit has and will have in the UK from the perspective of the media. So, to start, Brexit is simply the UK's decision to leave the European Union. 28 countries make up the EU, yet this is monumental because the UK has been a prominent member of the EU, and this could affect Great Britain's economy negatively. Previously, Britain would have been said to have meaningful and strong business and trade connections globally, and after they leave, they might not be trusted by other countries any longer. Being in the EU meant that they shared policies, laws, borders, and much more with other member states. On to the next slide. Basically, the UK had many reasons for leaving, and many of those were similar to issues that are relevant in America right now, such as immigration and education. Closing the UK's borders will affect employees and union members in the UK and outside of the UK who have migrated there for work. Media broadcasters globally have been seemingly worried about the UK's decision to leave. There was a referendum in 2016 that asked the public whether they wanted to leave the UK or not, and in a 52 to 48% win, the leave side was they had a favorable outcome. There's currently still no plan of exit, which is something that the news in the US and Europe both have been focusing on, and due to no deal being made yet, the date of departure has been extended, and it was originally supposed to happen end of March. On to the next slide. Negotiations are still present, and the media has heavily been fixated on the Prime Minister's inadequate job of coming up with a solid deal that Parliament can agree on. The withdrawal agreement will be an extremely important feature of Brexit since it will dictate the cost to leave, what happens to UK citizens living elsewhere, and border protections. This will all directly impact Britain workers, basically. On to slide 5. Union workers and migrants are left wondering what the future might look like for them once a Brexit deal is made. If migrant workers are forced to leave the UK, will British citizens actually take on their roles? Many people seem to not agree with that, and clearly new policies need to be made and made fast. Theresa May, the Prime Minister, is under pressure to appeal to many groups, and one important group being unions and workers that will be affected by Brexit. According to Bloomberg News, which is a global news agency, many citizens from other EU member states are rejecting the idea of emigrating. And the UK is losing a vast majority of unskilled laborers, which is an important part of their labor market, actually. And the broadcaster spoke on how a second referendum might be the only hope for Brexit, and maybe to stop Brexit from happening. This is just one example of the media siding with left-wing ideas, which is something that we see often, actually, in the media globally broadcasted and locally in the UK. This broadcast also posed the important question of whether British citizens will even want to take the jobs of these immigrants, which is they're not sought-after positions. On to slide 6. The Labour Party is run by Jeremy Corbyn, and their time in control could actually be on the horizon. This group was against Brexit since the beginning and is now just hoping for a reasonable Brexit deal. They seem to be appealing to the younger left-wing public opinion by blatantly claiming they're angry with the division in the government, the incompetence, and the deregulation that they're witnessing. All of this information was actually found on the Labour Party's website. There are many ways that the future of Labour might turn. However, they're hoping to remain in a customs union and a single market where they would abide by the rules of both. According to The Economist and an international news broadcasting channel, many young people were unaware of what the referendum even meant and didn't fully understand what they were voting for. This is on slide 7, by the way. The Democratic Unionist Party will not show May any further support, actually, which shows how terribly wrong leaving the EU has become for her in office. A new referendum would indefinitely divide the government further, yet might paint a clearer picture as to how the public really feels about Brexit. This is a perfect chance for Labour Party to take office, even since May's party has lost trust in her ability to fix this mess. Again, this is an international news broadcasting agency that is left-leaning and, of course, aligns with Labor's views. On to slide 8, in another Economist article, from a more neutral perspective, it discusses what might happen after Brexit leaves. Before Britain leaves, sorry. There could be a snap general election in which Corbyn would win over May. Again, the idea of a second referendum has been in the talks for a while from people who weren't really sure of what Brexit was to begin with and the impact it would have on Labour. Without a doubt, Corbyn would face big business pressure and neoliberal pressures if he were able to take over, since the power would be shifted to the trade unions and a potential quote-unquote war with the labor markets that would develop. On to slide 9. Having touched on this topic a little bit, migrant labor has not been discussed very in depth in the news, nearly as much as labor in general has post-Brexit. Migrant labor is very important to the UK's economy and labor market, where they dominate certain industries, particularly the food industry. In an interview with a couple of migrants in this next video, you'll see the fears and opinions following Brexit. An important part of this video is when the idea of British workers taking on these roles is discussed. Many scoff at Brexit solely for this reason, since these jobs will be hard to fill by British citizens. Many of these migrants struggle to pay the bills and make ends meet, and they still hold these positions. The Guardian is clearly a center-left mainstream media source. On to slide 10. From the few mainstream media sources that I researched, they seem to have a clear center-left perspective on Brexit. The Guardian and Euronews were a couple that I looked into, and they all seem to broadcast the same types of topics from the same perspective. Slide 11. The global and international outfits I looked at were mostly neutral and sometimes leaned more left, as well as with the exception of Fox. They all have one thing in common, which is that Brexit is just a mess, and they're all searching for some type of organization. But the topics they choose say a lot about what they want the public to perceive. Lastly, it is the media's responsibility to broadcast the whole truth to the public while assuming the public does not know anything about Brexit. Also, to provide an ample amount of background knowledge so the public can form a non-biased opinion. Educating the public and being neutral is very important, and we see an opinionated media which can have consequences. Thank you.